In February 1637, a single tulip bulb could buy you a house in Amsterdam. Not a flower, not a garden, a bulb. One piece of dried plant matter that would bloom for maybe 2 weeks before dying back into the ground. At the peak of the mania, a Semper Augustus tulip sold for 6,000 florins. That was 10 times what a skilled craftsman earned in a year. Enough to buy a canal-side mansion, fully furnished, with money left over. Welcome to the Ledger Chronicle, where the vault of history unlocks the secrets of money and power. Within weeks, those same bulbs were worthless. The market collapsed overnight, fortunes vanished, and the Netherlands learned a lesson that every generation since has forgotten and relearned the hard way. This is the story of humanity's first recorded financial bubble. And what makes it remarkable isn't just that people paid absurd prices for flowers. It's that the entire episode may have been exaggerated into legend. The truth, as always, is more complicated than the myth. The year is 1630. The Netherlands has just won independence from Spain after an 80-year struggle. And almost immediately, it becomes the richest place on earth. Amsterdam transforms into Europe's financial capital. The Dutch East India Company dominates global trade, shipping spices, textiles, and exotic goods from Asia. Merchant ships return laden with wealth. Banking flourishes. Art explodes. Rembrandt is painting. Vermeer is working. The Dutch middle class is growing richer than aristocrats elsewhere in Europe. And with wealth comes a hunger for status symbols. Art, rare books, exotic collectibles, anything that signals sophistication and success. Enter the tulip. Tulips weren't native to Europe. They arrived from the Ottoman Empire in the mid-1500s, brought back by diplomats and traders who'd seen them in Turkish gardens. The flower was unlike anything Europeans had encountered. Vibrant colors, elegant shapes, and most importantly, rare. By the 1630s, tulips had become the ultimate luxury good among the Dutch elite. Owning rare bulbs wasn't just gardening, it was a statement. You displayed them like art. You named them like racehorses. Semper Augustus, Viceroy, Admiral van der Eyck. But here's what made tulips especially valuable. Some bulbs produced flowers with spectacular streaks and flames of color. These broken tulips were breathtakingly beautiful and maddeningly unpredictable. You couldn't breed them reliably. A bulb might produce a stunning striped flower one year and a plain one the next. What the Dutch didn't know was that these patterns were caused by a virus. The Tulip Breaking Virus infected bulbs and created the dramatic color variations everyone prized. The virus also weakened the bulbs over time, making them harder to propagate. Scarcity built into the biology. So you had genuine rarity, stunning beauty, wealthy buyers, and no way to manufacture more supply quickly. The perfect ingredients for a price explosion. By 1634, tulip trading had evolved beyond simple buying and selling. Professional traders developed a futures market. Here's how it worked. Tulip bulbs can only be dug up and traded during a few months of the year when they're dormant. The rest of the time, they're either flowering or growing underground. So traders started selling contracts for bulbs that were still in the ground. You'd buy a promise to receive a specific bulb at a specific time, usually months in the future. These contracts could be bought and sold. And this is where speculation took off. You didn't need to take possession of the bulb. You could buy a contract, hold it for a week while the price rose, then sell it to someone else at a profit. The actual bulb might change hands on paper 10 times before anyone ever dug it up. The market moved from college taverns to formal trading sessions. Speculators piled in, not just wealthy merchants, but craftsmen, weavers, even servants. Everyone wanted exposure to the hottest asset in Europe. And the prices? They went vertical. In 1634, a rare bulb might sell for a few hundred florins. By 1636, prices had doubled. Then, doubled again. By early 1637, the most prized varieties were selling for thousands. A Semper Augustus reportedly sold for 6,000 florins. A Viceroy bulb went for 2,500 florins. Even more common rare varieties fetched 1,000 to 1,500 florins. To put that in perspective, a skilled craftsman in Amsterdam earned about 300 florins per year. A nice house cost 1,000 florins. There are records of people trading entire estates, breweries, and workshops for single bulbs. The famous story goes that one bulb was traded for a package that included 1,000 pounds of cheese, 4 oxen, 8 pigs, 12 sheep, 2 barrels of wine, 4 barrels of beer, 2 tons of butter, a bed, a suit of clothes, and a silver cup. Whether that specific transaction happened is debated, but the scale of the valuations is documented. People were trading years of labor for plant bulbs. What drove prices so high? The same forces that drive every bubble. First, genuine scarcity combined with genuine demand. Rare tulips were legitimately hard to obtain, and wealthy collectors genuinely wanted them. Second, price momentum. When something doubles in value, people notice. When it doubles again, more people pile in. Success breeds more speculation. Third, leverage and credit. Traders didn't need full payment up front for futures contracts. You could control expensive bulbs with small deposits, amplifying both potential gains and potential losses. Fourth, social proof. When your neighbor makes a fortune trading tulips, you feel foolish not participating. When every tavern conversation is about bulb prices, you convince yourself you're missing out. And fifth, the suspension of disbelief. At some point, people stopped thinking about tulips as flowers and started thinking about them as assets that only went up. The fundamentals stopped mattering. The price itself became the justification for the price. Now here's where the traditional story and the actual history diverge. For centuries, Tulip Mania was described as a society-wide catastrophe. Charles Mackay's 1841 book, Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds, painted it as total insanity. He claimed the entire Dutch population, from nobles to chimney sweeps, gambled everything on tulips, that the crash ruined thousands of families, caused mass bankruptcies, and triggered an economic depression. But modern historians, particularly Anne Goldgar, who spent years examining Dutch archives, found something different. The actual number of people involved in tulip trading was relatively small, maybe 350 to 500 active traders. They weren't peasants and servants. They were wealthy merchants, skilled craftsmen, and professionals. People who could afford to speculate. Goldgar found almost no evidence of widespread financial ruin. She identified fewer than 6 people who experienced serious financial trouble after the crash, and even in those cases, it's unclear tulips were the cause. No major bankruptcies, no mass poverty, no economic depression. So what actually happened? In early February 1637, something shifted. The exact trigger is debated, but the most common account points to a routine auction in Haarlem. Buyers simply didn't show up. For the first time, there weren't enough people willing to pay inflated prices for tulip bulbs. The realization spread instantly. If buyers were disappearing, who would you sell to? Panic selling began. Contract holders tried to unload their positions, but there were no buyers. Prices collapsed. Within days, bulbs that had traded for thousands of florins were being offered for hundreds, then tens. Some contracts became completely worthless. The futures market froze. People holding contracts to buy bulbs at inflated prices refused to honor them. Sellers holding contracts to deliver bulbs demanded payment that buyers couldn't or wouldn't provide. The Dutch government intervened, declaring that futures contracts could be voided with a 10% penalty. This essentially allowed buyers to walk away from their obligations for a fraction of the contracted price. The market never recovered. By spring 1637, Tulip prices had returned to normal levels. The mania was over. The collapse happened for the same reason every bubble collapses. Prices had risen beyond any rational valuation, sustained only by the belief that someone else would pay more. The moment that belief cracked, the entire structure came down. Some historians point to external factors. There were plague outbreaks in Dutch cities in early 1637. Fear of contagion may have kept buyers away from public auctions. Economic uncertainty may have made speculation feel suddenly reckless. But the fundamental cause was simpler. The market ran out of greater fools. When the last speculator bought in, there was no one left to sell to. And when everyone realized that simultaneously, the selling stampede began. It's the same dynamic that's played out in every bubble since. South Sea, Mississippi, Railway Mania, the Roaring Twenties, .com, housing, crypto. The details change. The psychology doesn't. So if Tulip Mania didn't cause mass financial ruin, why does it matter? Because even if the crash was contained, even if most people walked away relatively unscathed, the episode revealed something important about human nature and markets. Rational people, in a prosperous society with functioning institutions, convinced themselves that flowers were worth more than houses. They created complex financial instruments to trade things that didn't exist yet. They leveraged and speculated and assumed prices would rise forever. And for a while, it worked. Until it didn't. The mania left a cultural scar on Dutch society. For generations afterward, the Dutch became skeptical of speculation and suspicious of financial innovation. That caution served them well in some ways, but it also held them back. While Britain developed sophisticated credit markets and bond systems that financed empire, the Dutch clung to conservative finance, limiting their ability to compete. The trauma of Tulip Mania, exaggerated or not, shaped Dutch financial culture for over a century. Here's the strange thing about Tulip Mania, the exaggerated version, the story of society-wide ruin and madness, may be more useful than the truth, because the myth serves as a warning. It's become shorthand for speculative excess, irrational exuberance, and the danger of confusing price with value. Every time a new bubble inflates, someone mentions tulips. And that memory, even if historically inaccurate, might stop some people from making catastrophic mistakes. The actual Tulip Mania was a contained market episode involving a few hundred speculators trading luxury goods. But the legend of Tulip Mania has saved countless people from chasing bubbles ever since. What's undeniable is that Tulip Mania established a pattern that repeats across history. Asset with limited supply. Growing demand from wealthy buyers. Price appreciation attracts speculators. Speculation drives prices higher. Media attention brings in more buyers. Leverage amplifies gains. Prices detach from fundamentals. The narrative becomes "this time is different." Prices peak. Sentiment shifts. Panic selling begins. Crash. Recriminations. Promises that it will never happen again. Then, 20 years later, it happens again with a different asset. Railway stocks, real estate, technology shares, cryptocurrencies. The mechanics are identical. Only the object of speculation changes. We tell ourselves each time that we're smarter now, that we've learned from history, that modern markets are more sophisticated, that this boom is based on real value, not speculation. And yet the pattern repeats, because the psychology doesn't change. Greed, fear, social proof, and the dream of easy wealth are constants of human nature. Today, we live in an era of serial bubbles. Asset prices inflate, crash, then inflate again in a different sector. Central bank intervention smooths out the worst crashes, but enables new bubbles to form faster. We've seen .com stocks trade at valuations that made tulip prices look reasonable. We've seen houses in ordinary neighborhoods sell for millions based on nothing but momentum. We've seen digital tokens with no underlying value trade for billions. Every time, sophisticated investors with advanced degrees convince themselves the fundamentals justify the prices. Every time they're wrong. Every time, the crash surprises everyone except the handful who saw it coming and were dismissed as pessimists. The Dutch tulip traders weren't irrational. They were responding to the incentives and information available to them. In a rising market, buying looks smart. Selling looks foolish. Sitting out looks like failure. It's only after the crash that everyone agrees it was obvious all along. Tulip Mania may be history's most misunderstood financial crisis. The traditional story is probably exaggerated. The economic damage was likely limited. Most participants probably walked away without catastrophic losses. But that doesn't make it meaningless. It makes it more interesting. Because the real lesson isn't that people are irrational. It's that rationality itself can be a trap. In a bubble, the rational thing to do is participate. Prices are rising. Everyone else is profiting. Sitting out means watching others get rich while you don't. That's rational. Until it isn't. The Dutch didn't go mad. They responded logically to market signals. The madness was in the signals themselves. And that's far more dangerous because it means it can happen to anyone, including us, including now. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers, and I'll show you where to look.